Good afternoon. Just checking that everybody's hearing me. Those online, I see Karine and the other two persons I haven't met as yet. But I wanted to acknowledge that you're hearing me. And I see Thelma has joined as well. And Karine's mic is muted.
Yes, sir, I'm hearing you.
Great, excellent. And the other two persons, can you just briefly say your names? Let me ask Dwayne, so that I'm sure they don't see Dwayne hearing me. Bobby and George. Bobby and George, I've heard from Karine.
Amazing. Gopi and George, can you unmute your mic, please, so that Dr. James can hear you?
Yeah, we can hear loud and clear.
Okay, Govi,
That's George. It's clear. That's fine.
Perfect, perfect. Just wanted to acknowledge that you are in sync with us. Okay, I think that it is in order that I should briefly introduce myself. My name is Dr. Kenneth James. Ken for short is quite fine. James, Doc, call me anything. I'm very comfortable with that. And I work here in the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry. I have been associated with the Aging Center for some years now. Done quite a bit of work in and around aging and a lot of the aging research here. I'm, as you might suspect, I'm a medical doctor by training, but also worked in the international arena for many years at Boston University and then in international health and then in various parts of Africa and the Caribbean and Nepal and all around. And then decided it was time to come home because I was getting poorer and poorer by the day, all this travel. But what we are going to do today is just to talk about some of the theories of aging. And it is very much largely theories of aging because as you'll see, there is evidence to suggest that some of the theories have merit while we have yet to say substantially or definitively. We know that this is how aging works and this exactly is what causes aging. And then let me just introduce, get locally before I continue the persons who are in the room by first name again. Marisha, I know. Cassandra. And Cassandra. And we've had one person who has just stepped out briefly. Okay. So when we think about advance, please. That's what I've been using, the up down. Right, let's try the other way. Mouse is always better when these things happen. Touch screen down, frozen. Okay. While I get to Dwayne, my screen is temporarily frozen, so I'm just gonna activate it.
It's fixed now.
It's fixed. All right.
Try.
All right. Yeah, all right, yes. So just, I'm pretty sure that in your discussion so far, you have been broaching the issue of aging and what it is. And one view of it is that it's really a process of gradual and spontaneous change. And that is a change that occurs from the time you're born. That process of change begins from the time you're born, right through childhood, through to puberty, young adulthood, and then middle and late age. So aging itself is really a number of many complex processes occurring simultaneously. And then for convenience, you know, we have put it into these stages. But really, it's a continuous process. And we like, for convenience, to look at it in stages. Now, when we speak, so aging is overall a large picture. And there are many dimensions to that aging. You know, there are social dimensions, there are physical dimensions, psychological dimensions, and biological dimensions. And with regard to biological aging, there are two things that we like to distinguish and talk about. Senescence, which is a cellular process. So it's the process by which those cells which make up our bodies lose their capacity to grow, divide, and perform their usual functions over time. And if you gradually lose that capacity, at some point, you will approach zero capacity, and that leads to cell death. So senescence is at the cellular level. Biological aging, however, is the sum total, taken together, all that accumulated damage that leads to cellular dysfunction. And when your cells start to malfunction, eventually your organs start to malfunction, and eventually your systems start to malfunction. And if you have malfunctioned to the extent that you can no longer cope with the challenges of daily life, then you will decline and ultimately die. A process that all of us to date are going to undergo. So in biological aging, the net result is increasing mortality risk over time. So far, we have not been able to change that or avoid that mortality. We may change the time at which that mortality occurs, but not to ultimately avoid mortality. There are some things that we might we just spoke of biological aging. Now, sometimes people confuse biological aging with chronological aging. And many of the times, the two go in tandem with each other, but they are actually different. Chronological aging is just an arbitrary classification that speaks to somebody's system as saying time from birth. That's all chronological aging is, time from birth. Now, it turns out that as time from birth increases, so does all the processes of senescence and biological aging. And so we have come to really associate them. But we know there are many persons for whom time from birth is age 70, but functionally and biologically, they're like 40. And we also know of persons who are age 30, and they say, boy, them people just behave like an old person. So these persons would be biologically aged, but chronologically young. For most of us, our chronological age tends to match our biological age. One of the things that those in aging research want to do is to uncouple chronological age from biological age, so that when you're 80, you will be functioning like what we currently know as a 30-year-old. All right? But chronological aging has its uses, and sociologically, it's important because we define things such as retirement and how you should behave according to your chronological age. So every time we go out, if we dress a certain way at our age, people tell us to act our age because there's a social expectation that when you're that chronological age, you should be not running up and down and being giddy-headed at 40. You know, people are saying you should be settling down, you should be trying to achieve this, acquire this, do that, etc. So it does have its uses. For chronological aging, I briefly mentioned this because you're going to see it over and over again. This concept of young old, middle old, and old old. Originally, Newgarden in 76 defined only two categories, those from 55 to 75, and those above that age as old old. We've since modified this definition to include a middle old. And we've changed, depending on which country you are and where you have, the young old will begin at 60 because that's the retirement age and the socially accepted border of being old or classified as an old person. But you look, and as you read the literature, you'll see that some people refer to older persons. And that group of older starts at 55. They don't say you're old, but they say you're older. So just recognize that because much of social policy is dictated around that. And we say that chronological age has its uses, and you have already met, I'm sure, this issue of population aging as a major problem emerging, especially in our Caribbean countries and in the developing world. Where increasingly larger and larger numbers or percentages and proportions of the population are over the chronological age of 60 years. That's the phenomenon of population aging. And you can see here the projections, looking at life expectancy across the world from 2000 to 2050. And you can see that increasing numbers of persons at each of these ages will be present. That is the issue of population aging. Increasing life expectancies. People are living longer and longer, and you can see the increase is not only confined to the 60s and the 65s, but also to the 80-year-olds. So we are going to be seeing older. Across the world, you see the pattern may vary by countries in terms of the increase in life expectancy. And you can see that the increase in life expectancy is going to be most marked in the least developing life expectancy at birth is going to be masked in the least developed countries. Those are the poorest countries of the world. They're going to have markedly increased life expectancies at birth. But life expectancy at age 60 and at age 80, where are these greatest increases going to occur? They are going to occur in the so-called lesser developed regions, otherwise called the third world, not the poorest, middle of the road regions, and equally well, we are going to be seeing increasing numbers of people over age 80 in these so-called medium and middle income countries, where the majority of our Caribbean region lies. So we are going to be seeing this. We have done pretty well with respect to life expectancy at birth. Most of our countries have life expectancy 70, 75, and a few people are heading towards 80 now in some of our countries. And so that is not where the big increase is occurring. It's occurring in the people who already get to 60. They are going to increase the time of life after 60. So what is it that determines length of life and how we age? A number of factors have been identified. Your genes. your access to healthcare and medical treatment, your lifestyle, and your exposure to environmental influences and toxins. So we know that your genes essentially sets the pattern for your life. And we call that, we determine that factor as influencing your basic length of life. We know of families that they're just long livers. You know, you look at a family and all of them reach 85, all of them reach 86. And then you might look at another family and all of them, none of them have passed 65. And so genes do play a part. Of course, healthcare, technology, and how we treat diseases will determine your length of life. How you live your life, avoiding exposures such as smoking, maintaining healthy weight and diet, exercising, as well as the social support and being free of stress, we know influences your length of life. Of course, if you are constantly exposed to toxins, we know that many toxins accumulate over time and eventually will take its toll on your life. So that even if you are blessed with long life genes and we subject you to these toxins, your life is going to be much shorter than it should be. A quick distinction, because it's worth mentioning that disease is not, aging is not equivalent to disease. In both aging, biological aging and senescence, functions decline. Physiological functions decline, but we would not say you are diseased. Because you run a little slower at age 80 than you did at age 20 does not mean you have disease and you're ill and sick. So there is a certain amount of normal decline which is not considered disease. However, where do we draw the line between normal decline and disease? This is sometimes a matter of debate. And there's a lot of questioners. Well, you slow down a little bit mentally. You don't add numbers so quick. And is a little forgetfulness normal? Versus dementia. Where does the line where do you draw the line between normal decline in mental function and dementia? Maybe we shouldn't be forgetting at all. And once you start forgetting things, you have disease or something. So making that distinction is not so easy. And we have to come up with norms, and people have things and say, if you score over this on this test, you have a problem. Or if you score less than this, you have a problem. But all of these are subject to interpretation and maybe different within different societies, viewed differently in different societies. With age, as the manual notes, the body's functions decline. As we age, for example, blood sugar levels generally increase, much more after eating a given meal of carbohydrates than younger persons. But do we say that person is ill and has diabetes? Where is that line? Mental decline occurs. We know that older people do not learn new languages as much as younger kids. Younger kids, you take them from one country to the next, and before you know it, they are fluent. The brain is just malleable and it just absorbs stuff. We in our older years don't seem to be able to have that facility. We seem to be more rigid and plastic. And you know, in the days gone by, people will say, you're set in your ways. It's really the capacity to adapt is a little bit different. We talk about Alzheimer's disease as opposed to a brain that undergoes normal aging. But why do we age? We know we cannot live forever. Our cells and tissues cannot go on forever. But what is it that controls how we age, when we age, and the rate of aging? Is it related to a gene that controls how our cells divide? Is it related to a gene that controls our ability to repair our cells if damaged? So these are questions people have been asking. Is it related to cell division per se, or is it related to cell repair? In our automobiles, the automobile will last a lot longer if every now and then we can replace the parts and repair. But there are some automobiles where you know that after 10 years, this car will be no good. It's just built to last for 10 years, and after 10 years, it will be gone. We know there are other factors that influence this aging well, how we age and at what rate we age, including physical fitness, bone mass and muscle strength, insulin sensitivity, positive thinking, as well as religious belief. We have studies showing that people who have a religious belief seem to live longer than people who don't. And people who think positively about the world live longer than people who don't. They age better. So clearly there are factors now emerging that these things. And it doesn't actually matter what religion you are. It's the idea of a belief in some greater being or a greater force that seems to do that. People say also people are religious seem to have a new vision of hope. And this hope influences your hormones and all the things that are occurring in your body, and therefore you age so much better and you live so much longer. We know that a little exposure to stresses helps you live longer. If your life is too stress-free, it doesn't work. It's almost like they say a motor car. If you keep that motor car in the garage and never drive it, it doesn't perform as well as if you test it a little every now and then. But it is true that you don't want to test it on the worst roads in the worst conditions. So a little stress in life is good. It seems that the perfect life is not what you should desire, meaning, if you think about it, people who have no money worries, no job worries, nothing in life, and just lounge around all day, they actually end up dying and become seemingly more miserable than people who have a good portion of everything, but also some challenges. And so many persons, when they have everything already, they still have to find something else to do to fulfill life. One could argue that Bill Gates could sit at his home and just wake up and, drink coffee and wake up and drink coffee. But it seems that those people, if they do that, they would die. And many of us know of older people who, when they were put in the perfect environment, they actually got worse. Everybody's now doing everything for them. They are not functioning, and they seem to go off and die earlier. We know that changes in lifestyle, including calorie restriction, eating a little bit less, not drinking so much alcohol, moderation, reasonably improves length of life. An observation has been made that there is a correlation between body mass and lifespan. And when we look at animals within the across life within the animal kingdom, we see that the smaller the animal, the shorter the lifespan. So the normal lifespan of a rat is much smaller than the normal lifespan of an elephant. The normal lifespan of a crocodile is actually longer than the lifespan of a human. So the larger animals live longer. That's just an observation. And we'll see some explanations. Why is it that animals that are very small live for a short time? If any of you raised rabbits, after a certain time, even if you do nothing with the rabbits die. Our dogs, they live, we treat them the best, but they only live 14 years, whereas a human is expected to live 65, 70 years. So, this is an interesting observation. And this has led to the formation of a number of theories around what determines lifespan. I'm gonna come back to that. So one observation is that body mass is correlated with average lifespan. Another observation concerns morbidity. And we can look across various diseases. And the conclusion is that in general, morbidity tends to increase and peak around 60 years. And then after, the rate of illness or the likelihood and the risk of illness declines, especially after age 80. Now, if you manage to get to 110, the curve actually gets flat. So what is it happening at 110? Why do you think if we got to 110, the rate of morbidity or the risk of illness essentially remains flat? Bear that in mind. I'm going to come back to that. Let's talk about why is it that maybe after age 80, we find among those people who get to 80, they seem to have less suffering, less pain, less illness than persons, say, between 60 and 75 as a whole. Morbidity risk, morbidity rate for various diseases declined. As you can see, for some diseases, the decline is more dramatic than others. Any idea? Any suggestions as to why this may happen?
I'm not sure, but there's this whole theory of regeneration.
Of a theory of regeneration. Okay.
So that could mean that their bodies have been impacted by whatever illness, and then their bodies sort of go under some regeneration to remain needed.
Okay. So one suggestion here from the class is that there are theories about regeneration, especially among the old, the very, very old, that after their bodies have gone through this decline, they seem to regenerate some cells, and therefore the risk and disease patterns essentially remain constant. There's also something called the healthy survivor effect. That those who make it to 80 are a special group. And between 60 and 80, those weaker ones have been weeded out. So that you find these 80-year-olds that are actually amazing compared to some of their younger cohorts as a whole. Doesn't mean that you don't find a very sick 80, really sick 80-year-old. But taken as a group, you begin to find that. This is called the so-called healthy survivor effect. And that those who get to 80 have been specially selected by nature or have some genetic or other competitive advantage that allows them to have this decreased morbidity after age 80. After 110, people believe that there's a threshold, that there's a baseline. You know, the risk essentially remains same. I mean, once you get there, you know, you basically are constant and just sitting around waiting to die. So your risk of any of these diseases is essentially small and remains constant. So the moral of the story is of this story at least, about morbidity is get to 80. Don't aim for 60. There are rough years between 60 and 80. Get to 80 and smooth things out. Now, all of these, all the evidence started out with perhaps, yeah, I'm sure people had thoughts before that, but the first person to really elaborate on a theory of aging and concepts of aging was August Weismann. And Weismann essentially said, when I think about aging, there is a so-called adaptive concept and a non-adaptive concept. The first concept, which really developed into a theory, is that aging evolved. The process of aging came about in order to cleanse the population of old and non-reproductive consumers. In other words, you really have, in the story of mankind, you really have very little use once you pass your reproductive age. You're a luxury. What are you hanging around for? This was August Weismann's looking at it. And he also observed that aging is due to the natural greater weight given to early survival and reproduction than to vigor at later age. So the body itself has evolved over time and is geared towards survival and reproduction, not for vibrancy at old age. Because what are you remaining vibrant at old age for? You're no use to the society and the species as a whole. And many people would now say, oh, what a wicked man. But in a way, that is kind of true. All right? So he started with this. And from these have come what we call theories of aging. And there are thousands of theories. But if we group the theories, we would recognize that they fall into 3 or 4 groups, depending on which text or which author you're reading. There are so-called evolutionary theories, theories around programming, that genes and the cells are programmed for certain things to occur at certain times. There are theories we call the damage theories, where they say that essentially we age and we eventually die because of various damage inflicted on our bodies and cells, including damage from stress. And then there are theories that go beyond the molecular level of aging and talk about organ level and systems level changes that are responsible for aging. And we are going to broach all of these. So in general, I just summarize it to say there are evolutionary theories, there are theories that are molecular-based theories, there are theories that are cell-based theories, and there are theories that speak to the system as a whole, organs and systems as a whole. Now, these table 1 here, which is taken from one of the journals, and I should have put the source, provides a classification of many of the main theories of aging. And this is also, for those with a physical handout, this is also at the back of your handout for easy reading. But those of you who are going online, you should be able to see this quite clearly. There are evolutionary theories, molecular theories, cellular theories, system theories. And we are going to go into some of these briefly. We can't discuss every single theorem, but at least we can broach the evolutionary, the molecular, the cellular, and the system theories. So let's talk about the system theories, the so-called mutation accumulation theories, the disposable soma theory, and the antagonistic pleiotropic theory. Mutation accumulation. This essentially says that the stability of our genes and the maintenance of healthy genes is critical to good life. But as we grow older, i.e. with time, there are certain things that occur in our genes, and we know that every time a cell divides, there's always the possibility of mistakes and mutations and adaptations. So therefore, if you are constantly not doing things perfectly as you age, eventually they say it's going to catch up with you. So over time, you'd have accumulated all kinds of mutations. Some mutations resulting in mass cell death. And that's because the integrity of your DNA has been compromised. So that's the mutation and accumulation theory. There's also the idea of antagonistic pleiotropy, which says that what we really have at heart in this business of evolution and human development is there are two strategies to species sustenance. One strategy is, look, be very reproductive, produce lots of children, and use up lots of energy in that process and die early. But that's good for the society because that way the species is maintained. As opposed to another trade-off, which is, hey, conserve on the reproductive energy. And then have fewer, don't reproduce so quickly and so often, have fewer offspring, but be around to ensure that those offspring survive. So you do reproduce less, but live longer, and that assures greater survival of your offspring. So we can either be, in a sense, a rabbit or an elephant. Rabbits every 3 months, 6 more rabbits. An elephant, 1 cub every 24 months. But that elephant is likely to survive for a long time. The disposable soma theory. Soma means, of course, a body. And says that, and it's tied somewhat with the antagonistic pleiotropic theory. It says, high metabolic cost reduce the resources available for other essential functions, such as reproductive capacity. So from an evolutionary viewpoint, a species' best survival is to limit investment in the repair of injuries only to the amount that is necessary to produce offspring. So we are going along with time. We are aging. Only repair damage that needs to be repaired so that you can reproduce well. Therefore, after your reproductive time is over, why spend energy repairing your own body? Allow yourself to die. The investment of resources must come up to the point of reproduction. If that's your strategy, then you won't be into maintaining your body to the ultimate. You'll simply be into maintaining your body up to the point that you can reproduce well. Consequently, some things are not repaired and you're going to get permanent damage. It's just like your brake shoe. I have had the experience recently. I saw the thing saying the brake, the brake is really, really worn and I should go to the mechanic, and ignored it. I decided not to repair. And eventually, the disc, the drum of the brake drum became permanently damaged and everything had to be changed. In other words, that car was dead unless lucky enough for mechanics, we could actually do something. But for your body, when you inflict certain permanent damage, it can't be repaired. It's dead. You're dead. We briefly spoke of antagonistic pleiotropy. And again, I've said it relates to where do you place your emphasis? And this is, fast reproduction, short life versus longer life with slower reproduction. Now, interestingly, in this theory, they have proposed that genes, some genes which are beneficial at a younger age, are actually disadvantageous at an older age, and we suffer the consequences of that. For example, it is proposed and theorized that having higher levels of blood sugar is a great thing when you're young. Because when you're young, and as humans, we are evolved to chase, hunt, and gather, and run fast, and flee from animals and so on, right? And therefore, you needed energy. So persons who had a slightly higher level of glucose were selected advantageously because that was the thing. But these genes that predispose you to maintain a slightly higher level of blood sugar when you're old becomes disadvantageous. When you're old, the muscles don't work so well, the kneecaps have become arthritic. Running is not the thing. And having high levels of glucose to chase down deer or buffalo is not the thing that is to be done. So these genes, which conferred you an advantage when you were young, now become disadvantageous in older age. Now, these genes nowadays, we've done some scientific research, and some of these genes are controlled by substances that are called sirtuins. These sirtuins were first isolated in yeast cells, but they have a moderating function on metabolic processes. They seem to be able to switch on certain things and switch off certain things, including sugar and hormone levels, including whether a cell reproduces out of control or not, i.e. cancer. And the discovery of these sirtuins gives some credence to these theories about, certain things being switched on and switched off because of certain advantages in younger life. The molecular theories, we know that length of lifespan changes from one species to another. So bacteria, such as amoeba, seem to be ageless. They continue dividing and dividing and dividing, and they seemingly never die. But even among those bacteria, we see that they sometimes resort to reproduction in order to retain their vitality. So if in some bacteria, the cell just divides and divides and divides. But occasionally in these cells, you get some fusion of cells and exchange of DNA material, a kind of sexual reproduction. And it seems that some bacteria undergo this because it mixes up things again and seems to generate species that are a little bit more robust and a little bit more, a little bit better able to respond to challenges in the environment. This is why it is thought that humans have adopted the strategy of sexual reproduction rather than asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction ensures that everybody is the same. And that could be a very big disadvantage, because should environment or conditions change, nobody can adapt. Whereas sexual reproduction mixes up the genes and we can adapt to different environments. Now, multicellular organisms, we note, have a prescribed lifespan, unlike these constantly dividing bacteria. And they tend, and we note that active creatures are shorter lived, larger creatures longer lived. And in all these creatures, we see this pattern with respect to aging. We see changes in skin, changes in hair, changes in posture, changes in muscle strength and vigor, and diminishing ability to adapt to the environment. So regardless of what of which species you are, you find, for example, if you and your dog, as your dog ages, you notice the dog doesn't run as fast. You notice the joints look arthritic. The dogs also, some of them go blind. They lose their teeth. Their coat, which was wonderful and shiny, doesn't look so nice. They start shedding hair like. We notice, for example, although they say humans are descended from the monkeys in short, evolutionarily speaking, we notice that gorillas also develop gray hair as they go older. You know, the so-called silverbacks, these marks of maturity. We notice that animals are not as nice in terms of appearance when they are older than younger. The skin texture stages. People talk about your skin being like cow skin. You know, it's old and tough. The muscle texture changes. An old cow you have to put in the pressure cooker for 2 hours. Right? Those bones are, you know, tough and so on. Very different. So what we see is that many species have similar patterns, which suggests that there may be a bigger overarching picture of what controls aging. Is it really determined at the genetic level? And every species has this programmed already. Part of the molecular theories are those that refer to errors. They say every time our cells divide and grow, they are not always copied perfectly right. And over time, when they are not copied perfectly right, the genes do not retain their original integrity. Therefore, they don't function as they started out. And these errors essentially lead to us not functioning so well as before. And over time, this is aging. Your ability to adapt to the environment and cope with the changes and go about your usual lifestyle is impaired. They are also determined that there are problems with the expression of your genes. That is to say, when your genes don't act directly on your cells. All of your genes work through the secretion ultimately of proteins. So your gene that says, I want your hair to be curly, it has to go through a process and is decoded, and then proteins that curl are built into your hair. Your genes say that you're going to be a tall person with long bones, or you're going to be a strong person with great muscle mass. All of that message has to be decoded, and you send out proteins which carry these messages and say, this is what needs to be done. Now, when you have the DNA not being copied right, or the genes not being perfectly right, then you get secretion of abnormal proteins. Things that should not be produced start being produced. And whenever in a body you have things that should not be there, these things are going to be essentially harmful. They're a threat to life. And therefore, this underlies the business of aging. Because you remember, aging is about loss of function, loss of capacity to cope. So we're not thinking about time here. We're thinking about capacity to cope with the environment. There's damage to the DNA. We know that exposure to things such as radiation damages your DNA. And if you get damage to your DNA, your cells don't function. Eventually, your systems don't function eventually as they should. Again, suggesting that the molecular basis of aging. Similarly, once something is damaged, that cell, that tissue does not function as it should, cannot adapt as it should, cannot respond as it should, that is aging, decline in function, in usual and expected function. If that decline is substantial, you move from aging to disease. Over time, all this damage can accumulate and lead to wider dysfunction. And remember that the cells you produce are determined by your genes, and your genes have to be copied right into the new cells that are produced. If you have damage all around, eventually you can get this differentiation. The cell that the end product that should have been there is not the end product that is produced. And this may well underlie the development of cancer. One of the theories. Or the cartilage in your knees should have been a very smooth thing. Now, with some damage, the cartilage that's produced, it doesn't have the right hydration. It doesn't have the right molecular mix. It doesn't function the same way. Those are some of the molecular level theories. The cellular level theories. The big theory at the cellular level is related to telomeres, so-called cellular senescence. And it says that all of aging and those changes that occur are dependent on the function of things called telomeres. We note that there appears to be a predetermined lifespan. Cells cannot keep dividing forever. The limit seems to be determined by telomeres, which are special ends of the chromosomes. Now, because of the way DNA is replicated, and of course DNA has to be replicated if cells are to divide, there occurs progressive fraying or distortion in the telomere structure with each cell division. Now, I'm going to just go to 2 more slides and then come back to that slide. So this is an observation. Cells can't live forever, and the limit seems to be associated with these so-called telomeres. And we're going to get into the structure and function and the way telomeres work in a short while. Another observation was made by one researcher, Hayflick, who noted that when they remove certain cells from certain organisms and they grow them artificially in various nutrient media, the cells thrive for a while, but eventually they die. And it is thought that these cells undergo about 40 to 60 divisions before they die. Now, if this did happen, what might very well be useful for us is to take some of our cells, put them down in a little petri dish, waiting so that when we run into trouble with certain tissues in our body, we could go back and say, give me some of the good cells and inject it. But unfortunately, if we take them out and try to store them, after a certain amount of divisions, they die. This becomes the so-called Hayflick limit after the researcher who discovered this phenomenon. And the essence of the phenomenon is that cells have an internal clock which dictates when they must die. It is thought that for humans, the internal clock is about 120 years. That cells, the maximum that, as we know currently, is for life expectancy. It is thought, the maximum life expectancy. That doesn't mean somebody can't live beyond 120. But in general, the divisions of our cells are such that by 120 years, they would have shut off and died. Now, some of them don't make it to 120 because of other things also happening. But if in a perfect world, nothing happening, it would make it to about 120 years. We believe that's the current natural limit of the human lifespan. All right. Essentially, what they've done is look at those cells and the number of divisions and how long it takes for these divisions to occur. And then they say, based on this, they do 40 divisions, and based on the time required for such division, it would accumulate to 40 to 60, about so many years. Yeah, the oldest you've seen is 111. The oldest person in the world originally came from Dominica. She was 120 something. She got to 120 something. And up to 2-3 years ago, the oldest person in the world documented was a Jamaican lady at 117. And she was doing, I know her and I know where she lives. She was doing, I refer to people talking about taking people out of their comfort zone. She was doing absolutely fine, perfectly well. She plays piano, she reads without glasses, she still teaches students music. She did her own cooking, washing, everything at 117 and took care of her children. And incidentally, one of the children was 102, the other one was 90 something. So it seems that her thing is that she's blessed with genes. So apart from genes, the family seems to be blessed with genes. Everybody living 90 and beyond. And she's doing fine. And a relative from the US comes to her home. She's in her community where she has her social function. She's very well taken care of in the community. Takes her at night, because they knew the community would have rebelled. Takes her at night and takes her to Montego Bay, 20 miles ago, and puts her in a nursing home. And of course, the lady died very shortly afterwards. And the community...
It should have been sued, sir.
It
should have been sued. I remember it, sir. Her last name is Brown.
That's correct. That's Miss Brown, Miss Vai.
Yes.
It was really a traumatic experience for the community.
I tell you.
And, everybody was... And, she was such a gem. Everybody knew her, and she didn't need help. She was doing everything herself. So we know that she was approaching the so-called limit of human, what we currently call the limit of human lifespan. We have one who is 117 now. So we are getting there. In Clarendon. And a man. Incidentally, I believe the university was trying to get her body so that they could do some research and studies. But of course, the family and the whole thing was so messy that nobody would, consent and so on at the end. Just an awful opportunity miss. Or an awful mess of an opportunity. All right, so we know that the clock seems to be programmed there. Now, telomeres. What are telomeres? Telomeres, every chromosome has at the end of the DNA strand, chromosomes are made of 2 strands, has at the end of the DNA a terminal cap. And this is where the telomere is. The telomere, for those who are biochemically inclined, is a sequence of bases, and there are lots of things. Nobody cares. Nobody needs to ask about it. But if you get excited, you can go and read about it. Thymine, adenine, guanine, and cytosine, and all these things. But it repeats, a series of bases that are repeated. But there's a problem with the telomeres. It turns out that every time a cell divides, the telomere shortens. Now, I'm going to jump to the video and then come right back to here. There are 3 short videos that I'm going to show.
Inside a human cell is the nucleus. Inside the nucleus are 23 pairs of chromosomes. These are long threads of DNA carrying the genetic information. Right at the ends of the chromosomes are special stretches of DNA called telomeres. They are known to play a crucial role protecting the ends of DNA.
So we kind of think of this like the tip at the end of the shoelace, because if you don't have that tip, then the end of your shoelace frays away very quickly. You know, your shoelace won't work properly if it doesn't have a tip. And it's like the end of a chromosome, the end of a DNA. If it doesn't have an intact tip on it, the telomere, it too will fray away.
When a cell is replicating, it can't copy its DNA all the way to the end, and so telomeres shorten with each replication. If telomeres get critically short, the cell can malfunction and die.
If you don't have caps on the end of a chromosome, then the ends become very sticky. It's almost like the shoelace ends become tied together, and this messes up the genetic material. This can have disastrous consequences for cells, a little bit like if your ends of your shoelaces are tied together, you're going to trip up and fall.
Liz studied tiny single-celled creatures found in ponds called tetrahymena. They have enormous numbers of small chromosomes. She carefully determined the structure and makeup of their telomeres. Then she noticed something odd.
Something puzzling was happening at the ends of the DNA, the very short chromosomes in tetrahymena, and that was that DNA was getting added on to the ends of these chromosomes, and this was not anything that anybody expected DNA to do.
Something was adding new DNA to the ends of the chromosomes. The telomeres were not wearing down, and so the cells could replicate endlessly. They were, in effect, immortal.
We started to think there must be some new process that nobody had ever heard of before. It wasn't in the textbooks, and it wasn't anything that people had described before for DNA, and yet it had to be something to explain what it was we kept on seeing. And so I wanted to hunt this down.
All right. So these first observations that the chromosomes have these caps at the end, and with every replication, it shortens. And if you get shortened enough, you're eventually going to go right down to the real DNA material, and then that's going to get damaged. This Nobel laureate noted that some cells could divide forever and ever and ever. And what was it about these cells? And she would discover that these cells had a telomerase enzyme that regenerated the ends in essence. And so they could go on living forever. With that in mind, we have to ask ourselves, is this what's happening in humans? Where our DNA strands, our gene length, is shortening and shortening and shortening. And that's why we get eventual fraying. It will turn out that unlike bacteria, we don't have that capacity to regenerate that telomerase activity and go on forever and ever. Now, just as a quick kind of reminder, how does DNA replicate? And why does this shortening at the end of the DNA strand occur? Now, normally, if you imagine a DNA strand like a ladder lying on its side, there are two strands, and we label them conventionally. One strand runs from 5 to 3, and the other strand runs from 3 to 5. Though if you're not a biochemist or a thing, don't care. It's just one end. They're kind of inverted end, head to tail, head to tail. Now, how does normal replication occur? Normal replication occurs through the use of something called an Okazaki fragment. And you'll see how it is now that the Okazaki fragment works and why there's a problem with this fragment when it gets to the end of the DNA and why the shortening occurs. So let me hit that slide. Oh, no, that went to video 3. build a strand like the yellow strand. But there's a problem. There's no end for the Okazaki fragment attached to. You want to complete that yellow piece. The fragment cannot go into that gap to replicate. What does it do? Does a smile. It extends yellow piece. This enzyme called telomerase. Extends the length of the yellow strand. Now, the Okazaki can come to the end. There, so that that little piece that to be filled in can now be filled. Resulting in a strand that was as long as the original. The blue strand was as long as the yellow original, but there's a little piece now added to the end. So you can now replicate. Otherwise, that end would keep shortening and shortening and shortening. So it seems that telomerase activity is what determines the fact that if you can maintain your telomerase activity for the rest of your life, you'll never age. You'll always keep replicating and your genes will be perfectly replicated. If you can't do that, then the ends are going to be shortened and shortened and shortened. This video, I love it because it's so primary school, Sesame Street, and yet so profound. We try to capture the effect of telomerase.
So you can tell the age of shoes just by looking at them. Here's a new pair, and they've got nice laces with little plastic caps on the end that stop them from fraying. These are a different story. The laces are quite old and worn away, and on this one the plastic cap's gone completely and the ends are really frayed. The same is true of our chromosomes. They've got caps on the end called telomeres, and they also wear away over time. It turns out that this is actually a really important mechanism for cells to know how old they are. So as the telomeres get shorter and shorter, the cells undergo a process called replicative senescence. Essentially, it's sitting there not dividing, but also damaging the tissue around it. And that's thought to contribute to many of the diseases of older age. But there's an issue. All our cells have telomeres that get shorter as the cells divide. But we pass our chromosomes onto our children. So why don't they start off life with really short telomeres? It turns out this is all down to an enzyme called telomerase that's encoded on chromosome 5. And telomerase essentially resets the biological clock. Well, this is telomerase. I know it looks ridiculous, but it is actually a very good representation of the enzyme. We know it has a mitten shape, and inside is a template, which allows it to make repeats of DNA. So we take DNA precursors, add them into the telomerase enzyme, and it simply adds them on to the end of the chromosome. And we have multiple repeats on the end of the chromosome, protecting the rest of the DNA. So this is a fundamental mechanism in germ cells and stem cells. But what happens when it goes wrong? Well, if you don't have enough telomerase, then the telomeres are too short, and the cells will age prematurely. On the other hand, if telomerase is switched on in all the cells of the body, they all extend their telomeres. The cells don't know how old they are. They will grow and divide all the time, and that can give rise to cancer. So telomerase is an incredibly important enzyme. Apart from a few unusual exceptions like onions and fruit flies, it's really well conserved all the way across nature, from yeast to humans. And now we know so much more about what it is and how it works. There's the possibility of being able to design new drugs that can target telomerase and allow people to live healthier lives.
So this is where much of the emphasis is going now. And all the anti-aging research is, can I find a drug that turns on the telomerase and really allows us not to have DNA damage, not to shorten our so-called natural God-given lifespan, potentially. And this is, anybody who comes up with that is going to be a billionaire. A billionaire.
But you have to be able to turn it on and off.
Now, like every good thing, it's always not what it turns out to be. It may be opening a Pandora's box. But you know, something goes on and divides on, and wow, we can't control it. So in essence, just going back to that slide, shortening occurs during the replication. When shortening reaches a certain threshold, you get structural chromosomal damage and breakup. And all of these now damage our cells and constitute loss of function and capacity to respond, and therefore aging. Now, this telomere loss doesn't occur always at a constant rate. We are now knowing that certain things called oxidative stress, or certain processes, we'll talk briefly about that, increases the rate of shortening and results in premature aging. So one of the things that we are going to see is, as we try to have people live longer and healthier, one of the big advices is to reduce so-called oxidative stress. And feel free, get your water, come right back in, not a problem. All right. So we now know, of course, that shortening is not the only mechanism involved in aging at the cellular level. Some cells become senescent or show signs of senescence, even though their telomeres have been shortened. So what else could be happening? Have not yet been shortened. So, you know, as we say, they either show aging before they have been shortened, or they show aging even though they have not been shortened. So the question is, what else is going on? We now know that there are certain genes that can be turned on that affect the ability of the cell to survive, so-called oncogenes. And a classic example is one that is turned on prenatally, so-called carcinoembryonic antigen. When you're in the fetal stages, wonderful. It exists and it has a certain function, turns on. And part of its function is that it has to shorten certain cells within, we believe it shortens certain cells so that your body can take the shape and space is gonna occur and all kinds of things. But when this gene is turned on later in life, it results in the development of cancer.
So is it that I've seen or heard of cases, I'm not sure what that specifically is called, children born with
Yes, yes.
Is it that at that time that hormone was not produced?
It's very much related to the genes. They have, you know, damage to their genes, which causes premature aging. Certain things get turned on and the cells are told die early, go into senescence, produce all kinds of abnormal proteins because the genes are now coded for that. It's a genetic defect. Progeria. And you know, the child is 10 years old but looks like a 90-year-old. Now, So we suspect the telomeres have a big role, but is there anything else? Some of the theories, the so-called cellular theories, propose that other things contribute to aging. One being or something of those other things being the free radicals. These theories argue that biological process of aging is due to damage to the body cells, not the germ cells, not the ova and the sperm, but the somatic body cells. Several stressors cause these injuries and damage. Well-known examples of these stressors are so-called free radicals. When these free radicals damage the cells, lots of things can occur, including being prone to infections, less responsive to challenges from the cells being less responsive to challenges from the environment, and less injury repair. These free radicals, also termed in biochemical language reactive oxygen species, are thought to damage the mitochondria, the so-called power and energy houses of the cell, the power stations of the cell. And if you damage the power stations, the cells essentially can't function. There's functional decline, senescence, and then biological aging. These reactive species, biochemically, have so-called unpaired electrons, and so they are very willing to give away electrons. And when you give away electrons, it means that you want to combine with many other substances easily. Now, examples of these reactive species, these oxidants, the free radicals: dopamine, adrenaline, nitric oxide, which, and I always showed when I'm talking to older men, you know that nitric oxide is produced when you give people Viagra. So it's a trade-off between the joys of simulated reproduction and probably killing off a few of your cells. But I guess for older men, it's a trade-off worth it. All right. We know that certain leukocytes, white blood cells, produce certain substances, including hydrogen peroxide and so on and so forth, which are supposed to protect us from infection, but they also damage the cells. And when there is imbalance in what we call reduction oxidation processes in the body, you get these oxidants, reactive oxygen species produced. Consequently, the argument today is make sure your diet is rich in antioxidants. So we tell people, take in lots of known antioxidants, and these include vitamin C, vitamin E, the carotenoids, the beta carotenes. You go into any health store, you see butters, coenzyme Q, glutathione. All of these things impact the antioxidation process and promote better cellular health and seem to have anti-aging properties. SOD stands for superoxide dismutase, and this is an enzyme along with catalase known to mop up free radicals. And in order for them to function well, you need minerals such as copper, zinc, iron, manganese. So all of those stores, you see everything now having copper, zinc, manganese, one a day woman, one a day man, well man, Centrum, you name it. Everybody's stocking all these vitamins and antioxidants in the hope of anti-aging effects and stopping the cellular damage. This one slide, if in your spare time, you can read it if you want. That's just lots of biochemistry for those who are interested, but it's not really that you need to know. We know now that this cellular damage is real because of certain observed changes in cells of older persons compared with younger persons. Cells of older persons do not divide as rapidly as cells of younger persons. They are slow in protein synthesis, which is necessary for all the body to function. And these cells of older persons also produce some very abnormal proteins. And I'm going to speak about those as well. We also have observed under the microscope that cells of older persons have cross linkages between the DNA strands. So we get connections, and they elaborate all kinds of other proteins as a result of these interconnections, and we get unusual substances being secreted, which are believed to cause aging. These substances include things such as lipofuscin, a yellowish substance that is found in the cells. We have examined this substance, and we know that it is produced from a breakdown of cell membranes. Now, what we are not totally sure is whether these lipofuscin pigments mark the causative agents for aging. Is it because you produce these while you age, or is it because you're aging while you produce these pigments? We're trying to figure that out. We know in certain diseases, certain proteins, such as those persons who have Down syndrome, and are produced, tangled proteins. And these occur especially after age 60. And then the latter one, we know much more about now, so-called amyloid plaques, which are produced in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease, but are not produced in the brains generally of younger people. So we believe that these abnormal proteins represent either cellular damage or they are the cause of the cellular damage. We're trying to figure out which came first. What is the chicken? What is the egg? But they are clearly associated with aging. Another theory at the cellular level says that cells are programmed to die. We've seen previous reference to this. And they give as evidence for this programmed death the fact that, for example, when you're born, not when you're not yet born, when you're a fetus, your hand, for example, this is a solid club. Your fingers are not separate. It's all one big mass of cells. And then somewhere in the line, the cells between the bones just die off. And then you get separate fingers. Why do these cells die off? They must be programmed somewhere in the genes to say, when you reach age 9 months, or 4 weeks in the womb, or 2 months, whatever that time is, you are to die so that fingers can appear. We believe that such mechanisms might also be occurring why cells die off, and with time, that they are programmed to die after a certain time, and that as you age, this happens. We studied worms, the nematode worms, and we found genes in mice that seem to be the switch and the cutoff for saying, die now. One of them being the famous genes being named Clotho. Those of you who study Greek mythology heard of the 3 fates: Atropos, Clotho, and Lachesis. One of them unveils the thread of life. The other one spins it into the fabric of life. And the third one is the one that cuts the thread. So when that thread is cut, your life is over. So it's this gene that has been found in the mouse, which literally cuts off the cells and says, it's time, your time has come, die. So we know that programmed cell death is one of the possible reasons why we age and why we die. At the system level, the so-called system theory level theories, we believe that the immune system has a role to play in aging. And we also know that the immune system has a very big genetic component. There's a part of the structure of the gene system called the HLA system, the human lymphocyte antigen system, and that regulates all kinds of immune phenomena. We believe that this part of the genes regulate and determine how we react to the environment, how we defend ourselves, and consequently how we age. If you can defend yourself and your immune system is pretty competent, you're going to look, as they say, like a spring chicken. Right? You're going to look fresh, always fresh. But if you can't defend yourself, then you're going to be subject to cell damage and consequently loss of function and aging. Other things related to the system, system theories talk about rates of living. And these are occurring at the higher level. They say if you live the fast life, you die the fast life. So, for example, those of you who decide that all you want to do is you're going to go to drive the race cars during the day, drink all night, don't sleep, wake up, fly to Paris the next day, shop around, try on everything. You're not sleeping, you're not resting, you just live and party every day. Everybody knows that people who essentially party non-stop, after a while, they age tremendously more than people who are reasonable at their partying. We know that people who drink alcohol every single day, copious amounts of alcohol. People say, they say you're gray faster. They say your face look more awful. The fast life, it is thought, influences you. So your lifestyle, it seems, is translated through biochemical processes, hormones, lack of sleep, the hypothalamus, the regulation of all that seems to drive how you age. There are things about that all of us has a fixed metabolic potential. So we are given 2 liters of gasoline to get us through life. If you use up all the 2 liters in the first mile, sorry for you. Because your fixed metabolic potential is this. You can choose whether you want to spread it out a little bit more or you want to use it up all in one. So the idea is that we are given a fixed metabolic potential. This factory will produce 10 pairs of shoes. Whether you want to produce the 10 pairs in one day or you want to produce one a week, and so your factory is open for 10 weeks, is up to you. That's another theory. And so people say that hamsters and rats are the fast life people. They use, the metabolic rate of a hamster and a rat is ridiculously fast versus a crocodile who rarely runs, just crawls around. And the tortoise, we know tortoises live 80, 120, 180 years, 200 years. The tortoises do not use up their gasoline fast. They conserve their potential and therefore exist for a much longer time. So which will you be? The hare, the rat, the hamster, or the tortoise? This is just a passing mention to say that in some books, you'll see terms about stochastic and non-stochastic classification of these theories, which talk about a rational explanation and a well-schematized explanation of aging, whereas others say it's not schematized. Some people say rather than having cellular, evolutionary, cellular, molecular, they say programmed or damaged. Just that many classifications of these theories exist. Having looked at all this, I think we can safely say that no single uniform theory explains everything about aging. Aging is complex, and all these theories have relevance. Different people emphasize different aspects. Different people are putting their research energies into different aspects of aging based on one or more of these theories. So that is the essence of the biological theories. I'll spend just in passing a few moments on what are called social aging theories, because the title of the lecture is Aging Theories. I mean, largely I'm concentrated on the biochemical, physical, physiological. But just for you to know that you might Google something and you see social theories of aging. And I think that as you go into your social gerontology, you're going to hear more about this, but I think I should mention it. There are some social aging of theories, which are social attempts to explain what happens socially to us as we age. Three predominant theories: disengagement theory. I mean, there are a whole lot of them. Everybody comes up with one now. Activity theory and so-called continuity theory. Disengagement theory was one of the earliest theories and perhaps a very controversial theory. It says that aging is a process of gradual withdrawal from the society where the older adult is concerned. That there is mutually acceptable withdrawal. And this is a universal process that occurs as you grow old. So as you grow old, you are said to withdraw from society. It is thought that this is applicable to all elders in all cultures. And the key element of this theory is that this is beneficial to both the older population and the social system. Because gradual withdrawal doesn't upset the society too much. Notice it's a gradual withdrawal. So you maintain some equilibrium. And this is a time when the older person can reflect about life. And because you don't have the roles you need, you don't have to be the teacher, you don't have to be the parent anymore, hopefully, right? You don't have to be worried about finding food for your entire family because you've done that. And it's other people's business now. As you withdraw, you recognize that other people have to take over. So often, your role changes into being a mentor, into transferring knowledge that you have gained to your lifetime. So through this process, the society continues to function as older persons die. Now, we wish some people sometimes would withdraw and give up some of their roles. But having said, so although this theory is attractive, there's a lot of weaknesses to it. One is that there has never been any evidence to support that this disengagement is a consequence of aging or constitutes aging. We just put it forward that this is an observation, but we haven't proved it, that this is a natural, wonderful process, etc. The addition to is that many people, older people, don't want to just withdraw from society and become disengaged. They actually want to remain a part of the society. And if you impose the withdrawal, it may actually be harmful for the older person and even the society. More and more people have been discounting this theory and say, this one, we're not buying into it. We don't believe in it. We're not embracing it. A second social activity theory that was proposed way back in '53 is one by Havighurst, who is a developmental psychologist. And he takes essentially an opposite view. He says that remaining active is pivotal to satisfaction in old age. So he essentially opposes disengagement theory. And being successful at remaining active equals active aging. The activity can be physical or intellectual, but the key thing is that you maintain active role in the society. But he has a little twist. He says, however, remaining active does not necessarily mean remaining in the same role. You need to develop new interests, new hobbies, new relationships, new friends to replace those that are either diminished because of aging, including because of physical aging, or that you've lost. So it is true that maybe you can't be Usain Bolt and winning every 100 meters anymore. But he still remains still active. He's not old yet, but you notice he's trying out football. The athletics gone, his role in athletics is over. Try out something else. And many of us in the university and many other corporate offices, people retire and they still come into work. You need to leave it. Find a new role. Find something else. Find meaning. Develop new friendships. But for many people, unfortunately, they find themselves in that position because they never spent any time during their younger years learning how to develop friendships and relationships and hobbies outside of the one work that they were doing.
But I don't understand how the activity theory is a theory of aging, meaning I see where it is pointing out that remaining active and engaged in society is pivotal to satisfaction in old age, but how does it explain the aging?
All right. So what they are saying there is that socially, right, that the person who, being an aged person in the society now means you're not active in the same role. So when you change roles, you're essentially aging. That's what they're saying. When you start to change roles, such that you find new things in life, new things to do, new hobbies, you are in essence aging. So when instead of work becoming the big thing, your volunteer work after 5 o'clock and your church work and so on becomes now the main thing, that's a question of social aging because you're changing roles. And Havighurst is really a developmental psychologist. He described basically the process of aging, but he starts actually at childhood. He starts saying what should happen in childhood, what should this, and what should happen when you get to 60. And that entire process is aging. It is true that we start to age from the day we are born. So that's his part of his theory. It's not this part just takes out the older part, but he really talks about that. Now, in essence, part of his theory about that maintaining function and being active, he says a person should continue your middle-aged lifestyle as long as you can. As long as you can. Right? And equally well, he argues that because aging is this natural change of roles, people should not be guilty of ageism. That is to say, apply the same norms to you as to other younger persons. If you apply the same norms, you're going to end up discriminating or doing an injustice to you because you're judging me by the same standard, but I'm not the same person. So there's a lot of things about it. Now, a lot of people, unlike what Havighurst says that, look, your time come, move on. Havighurst is saying, because my theory says to age well, you need to be active. You should not demand, and the word he uses, demand, decline in involvement. Now, demand, urging, suggesting is different from demanding. So society should not say, you reach that, come, be done with you. You must step aside. But you may tell the person, you know, you're younger people, you may that, you can find new hobbies, but they say that we shouldn't demand it. And he points to evidence for his position. He says, we know activity is preferable to inactivity because one, if you're active, you contribute generally to the prosperity of society. And older members can find meaningful participation in other things. There are some weaknesses to his theory, such that he says, why are you proposing that aging is that older life should be characterized by being active, when older life is also characterized by functional limitations? You can barely see, you can barely walk, you can barely this. Why are you then saying you should remain actively engaged? Maybe you should withdraw a little bit and disengage. So there are some weaknesses. Some people argue that if you push activity theory too long, olders think that they should and must remain active and engage in dangerous behaviors like driving at night and insisting that I can do it when they actually functionally can't. So these are some of the theories. The last one I'll just mention is continuity theory, which is kind of where we are going now. It says aging is really that which results from everything that you've done in your life before. And your basic patterns of behavior that you exhibited when you were younger continue into older age, regardless of the changes that occur in your life. So if you were a person who spent money all your life and squander money, you're not suddenly going to, in your latter years, become, you know, parsimonious and very concerned and so on. If you are a person who you're generally not so outgoing, you're not suddenly going overnight become outgoing. And if you are a person who didn't care about how you ate, suddenly in old age, you're not going to be so concerned about the health of you, the healthy lifestyle and the nutrition. You're always an eater anywhere, anytime, anyhow. So these theories essentially, these continuity theories, however, give us some insight about behavior change in older persons. That if continuity theory about how you socially age, social aging, is correct, then there are consequences for how we approach theory, how we approach and intervene in later life. So they argue that in that concept, you should now take what we now call the aging across the lifespan. So things need to start from the day you're born, or perhaps before you're born, in order to guarantee successful aging. But some people criticize it, saying, listen, that's not so. People can change. Is your lifestyle immutable? No, but you can change. And people can learn regardless of where you're at. So even though this theory says you are what you were, you know, you are what you were in old age, you are what you were when you're young, it's not exactly true and acceptable. Suffice it to say that these theories, some of them, do not pay enough attention to things such as ethnicity, gender, lifestyle, socioeconomic status, because these things we know affect how you socially age. And we need to take some of that into account. Although these are theories, none of them have really come around to being really proved as to say, this is the be all and end all of how people age, both sociological as well as biological. Nobody is sure totally that this is what occurs. And maybe the search for one theory is an illusion. Maybe like many things in life, everything is multifactorial and there's not one theory to explain all. Einstein spent his entire life trying to find a unified theory of relativity. We are getting closer, but we still haven't. So it's one thing that will explain everything. So in closing, genetics, healthcare, environment, lifestyle have been increasingly linked to the way people age and why they age. It helps us determine why people successfully or actively age and why some people seem to develop disease. As knowledge increases around our aging issues, the theories of aging have been advanced, but also questioned, sometimes further developed, sometimes strengthened. It is a work in progress. So, having heard what you heard today, how long will you live? And will you have a healthy older life?
No.
No. I hear a resounding no. So we are still searching, and we know some of the things that we should be doing, and each day there are papers producing this does this does this seems to affect aging, but we really don't know the full story as yet. So be like Bugs Bunny. Antioxidants, good healthy lifestyle, grape juice, moderation, measurement in the salt and everything. And having done that, guess what? Your genes might say, yeah, I'm still going to cut your life short. All right, any questions as we close? All right, thank you very much, and thank you online for your presence and your smiles.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We enjoyed the class. It was nice. Thank you.